You know how sometimes you're scrolling and the comment section of a post is way more interesting than the post itself? Well, that's exactly what we're talking about today. We're going to dive into a short story that won a writing contest, but the real story, the one with all the drama, happened in the comments. This is all about art, how we react to it, and that really tricky line between fiction and real life.
So, this was the prompt the author got. The whole idea? Just write. Pure improvisation. It's about shutting down that little critic in your head and just letting something totally raw and unfiltered come out. A challenge designed to get to something real. And one author, Camphor White, absolutely went for it. But her story, Fini Flight, didn't just win the contest. It ignited a total firestorm. So before we get into the big debate, we got to look at the story that kicked this whole thing off. Okay, so the story itself is called The View from the Ledge, and it throws you right into the middle of a nightmare. We're on a high school rooftop with the main character, Piper. Down below, there's an active shooter, and her friend Kelsey has this desperate, absolutely terrifying idea. They should jump. You can just feel the sheer panic in Piper's words here, right? The story puts you right there on that ledge with her, facing this just unthinkable choice between two completely horrific options. I mean, what do you even do? While Piper is hesitating, just trying to process everything, her friend Kelsey, she just acts. She jumps. And suddenly, just like that, Piper is completely alone on that roof. That line is just a total gut punch. She's utterly and totally isolated in her terror. So, after all the chaos, Piper manages to hide. She eventually wakes up to the sound of first responders. And then she hears this number, 42. It's just a single, stark detail that makes the horror feel so sickeningly real. The massive scale of it all just hits you at once. And then we get to the final line. A police officer finds her, but she's just crushed by guilt. She runs to the edge, and she jumps. And that's how it ends. It's so abrupt, so deeply unsettling. And yeah, this was the spark that set the whole comment section on fire. So the story goes live, it wins the contest, but that was just the beginning. The comment section absolutely exploded. Right away, readers started splitting into different camps, debating not just if the story was good, but if it should even exist at all. Let's just look at the numbers for a second. The story got 207 likes, which is great, but look at the comments, 116. That's a huge ratio of discussion to likes. People weren't just passively scrolling by this one. They felt like they had to say something. So the first camp was filled with praise. You had readers like Chris Wood here who absolutely loved its raw power. They argued that a perfect short story should be provocative, it should be unpredictable. For them, the fact that it was disturbing was a feature, not a bug. But on the other hand, a lot of people were just confused. You saw a ton of comments like this one from Jeff Stefanos. Readers thought the pacing was jarring, the characters' motivations weren't clear, and this initial confusion was really the first sign of a much deeper critique that was brewing. And this is where the whole debate gets super fascinating. The feedback split into two really clear lanes. People weren't just arguing about whether the story was good or bad. They were arguing about what art is even supposed to do. So here's the split. On one side, you had the critique of craft, was it well written? Did the sentences work? And on the other side, you had the critique of reality. Was it ethically and emotionally responsible in the way it showed a real-world tragedy? The craft critique is perfectly summed up by this English teacher, Kayak Antonio. He really broke it down, pointing out confusing tense shifts, unclear motivations, all the technical stuff. But he also saw the raw power in it, saying the story had fire and much more than good bones. It was tough feedback, but it was also deeply constructive. But then came the critique of reality.
This comment from Jessica Marie, someone who was personally affected by the Oxford school shooting, it just changed the whole conversation. Her point was so simple and so devastating. The story just wasn't true to what really happens in these horrific events. She called it an emotional grab, and that term is really key here. It basically means the story was using the shock of a school shooting just for dramatic effect, without earning that emotion through an authentic, honest portrayal of the trauma. So now you have these two really powerful critiques just hanging in the air. How in the world did the author, Camphor White, respond to all this? Well, her reaction is what turns this whole thing from a simple online debate into a masterclass for basically any creative person out there.
In response to the English teacher's tough technical feedback, the author was just incredibly open. There was no defensiveness, no, you just don't get my art. It was just pure gratitude and a promise to take all of it into account.
Wow. And to Jessica Marie's deeply personal critique, her response was one of pure empathy. She acknowledged that the story doesn't match reality, and then offered this sincere apology for the pain it caused. It was just a masterclass in how to listen and engage responsibly with your audience. And that's really the journey here. What started as this completely raw, unplanned story got filtered through this intense public reaction. And because the author was actually willing to listen, it blossomed into something so much more meaningful, a powerful public example of creative growth and responsibility. Which leaves us with this one big, really important question. When art takes on real-world trauma, what does it owe to the truth? It's a question for every writer, every artist, and really for every single one of us who consumes their work. What do you think?